He asks if you've eaten, then adds he worries when you skip meals. You thank him, though you'd already eaten an hour ago. That's how it starts. Help that lands with a small weight attached. The words sound kind, but they settle in a way that asks you to shrink a little. He offers to drive you home, says it's no trouble. Later, he frowns when you don't text that you got in safely. You start to hear the tone beneath the gesture, the score he's quietly keeping. It's not rage or cruelty, just a soft insistence that you owe him something invisible. Control rarely arrives as threat. It comes wrapped in care, in a hand that steadies your elbow or reminds you to rest. You tell yourself it's concern, that it's nice to be looked after, but underneath, the ground begins to tilt. You wait for permission before deciding small things. You start to measure your calm by his approval. That's the paradox. Manipulation can wear the language of protection. It can sound like love when it's really surveillance. The comfort isn't false, it's just conditional. He says, "I only want what's best for you." You nod, though your chest tightens before you can explain why. What you're feeling isn't gratitude, it's the quiet pressure of being managed. And before long, it feels safer to agree than to be free. You've felt how concern can start to sound like care. Now comes the part where care starts asking for something back. At first, the exchanges seem harmless. You cancel plans because he had a long day. You stop mentioning the coworker who makes him uneasy. Each concession feels like cooperation, a sign of commitment. He praises you for being understanding. That word, understanding, turns into currency. When you give up a boundary, it doesn't look like surrender. It looks like choosing peace. He calls that balance, but it's a quiet trade, his calm for your compliance. Over time, your yes carries more weight than your no. You begin to manage his moods before they rise. You soften your voice, time your replies, plan for reactions that never should have been yours to predict. Dependency starts to feel like devotion. You tell yourself it's closeness, that he needs you. In truth, need becomes the proof of love. If he leans too hard, you take pride in holding steady. When he withdraws, you chase reassurance you once gave freely. That's how the contract forms, unspoken, binding, and self-erasing. He says, "You know me better than anyone." You cling to the compliment, though it means he's trained you well in the rules of his comfort. It's the kind of training that makes your own preferences fade. This is the emotional illusion that keeps the loop alive. The more you adapt, the safer he seems, and the less of you remains visible. You stop noticing how much effort it takes to keep the air calm between you. By the time you realize how uneven the kindness has become, it's already written in your daily habits, the small ways you ask permission to exist. Here's what happens when kindness turns into currency. You start measuring affection by what it costs you. He surprises you with a gift after an argument, a dinner, a weekend trip, something he says you deserve. The timing feels generous, almost restorative. You want to believe the tension has lifted, but there's a quiet pattern hiding under the charm. Every apology arrives with proof of effort, and every gift resets the scoreboard in his favor. Manipulation doesn't always punish, it rewards. The praise is sweet, but it trains you to respond. He says, "See, we're good now," and you nod, grateful the storm has passed. What you don't name is how small the storm was, how large the repayment feels. Generosity becomes performance, each gesture framed just right for your gratitude. When you hesitate, he looks hurt, asks why you can't just accept kindness. You hear yourself apologize for not being easier to please. The apology lands like a new thread, tightening between you. He tells stories that keep his reputation shining, how patient he is, how much he endures, how loyal he remains despite your moods. To others, he sounds steady, reasonable. That's the shield. His restraint becomes his evidence, and because he rarely raises his voice, you doubt your own discomfort. The real trick is this: protection becomes a stage. He guards you publicly, defends you in small visible ways, then uses that image as proof you're lucky to have him. It's a kind of generosity that leaves you indebted, not cared for. You start to sense the strings, the small tugs disguised as tenderness. He opens the door, but you walk through carefully, not to disturb his pride. You begin to perform appreciation before you feel it. That's the quiet exchange he's counting on. By the time you notice how practiced his kindness sounds, it's hard to name it manipulation. The gestures still look good from a distance, and from up close, you're too busy being grateful to call it what it is. Notice how the thanks start to sound rehearsed. You say it out of habit now, not warmth. He cooks dinner after a hard week. You tell him it means a lot. He nods, then reminds you how tired he is, how much he does that goes unseen. The air thickens, and your gratitude morphs into apology. You offer extra praise, another reassurance. What was once affection becomes repayment. That's the pivot, when a favor stops feeling free. Every kindness comes with a shadow cost, a silent ledger you try to balance. You buy small gifts to even the scale, soften your tone when he's irritable, agree faster than you mean to. The goal shifts from connection to stability. As long as he's content, you can rest. But rest never lasts. The better you behave, the more he expects. He calls it harmony. You call it exhaustion. The warmth between you turns into something transactional, a rhythm where his comfort depends on your performance, and every thank you starts to sound like, "Please don't be upset." You catch yourself defending him to friends. He means well, you insist, though your chest tightens each time you say it. That tightness isn't loyalty, it's the residue of constant monitoring. You've learned to scan for risk in ordinary moments. The emotional math becomes impossible. Guilt for resenting him, guilt for staying, guilt for wanting quiet that doesn't cost you anything. Gratitude used to bring ease, now it brings debt. He says, "I don't ask for much," and maybe he believes that. But what he asks is invisible. Your agreement, your availability, your silence when he rewrites what happened. You give it because peace is addictive once chaos has been renamed love. That's how affection becomes compliance. You don't stop caring, you just stop choosing. Each thank you buys one more day without conflict. And beneath every calm evening, there's the faint hum of fear you've learned not to call by its name. You already know the feeling of giving in, just to keep things steady. Now look closer at what that steadiness costs. His control isn't built on force, it's built on design. Every choice you make fits inside a pattern he's been sketching slowly, piece by piece. The compliments after arguments, the soft guilt after saying no, the way we quietly replaces you. It's not chaos, it's architecture. A structure that rewards submission and calls it closeness. He builds through consistency. One week he insists on paying, the next, he worries about how you spend. Each gesture seems isolated, but together they define the limits of your space. He never says, "Don't," but his disappointment is heavy enough to guide you. Over time, you move within those lines automatically, When you test the edges, speak firmly, ask for time alone. He shifts tone, not volume. He withdraws warmth instead of raising his voice. The silence lasts just long enough for you to fold. Then, once you do, the warmth returns. That's the loop. Reward for obedience, distance for independence. Control feels calm because the rules are clear. Predictability feels like safety when unpredictability once meant danger. But safety built on approval isn't safety at all. It's management. He sets the conditions for your comfort, then calls it love when you meet them. The deeper trick is how invisible it becomes. He trains you to narrate his logic. He's just particular. He's protective. He cares too much. You become both subject and storyteller, keeping his image intact while yours fades in the retelling. Notice how the pattern only holds if you keep explaining it. Once you stop, it starts to fall apart, and someone else can too. That's when you see the blueprint clearly. The compliments weren't random, they mapped compliance. The guilt wasn't spontaneous, it reinforced dependence. Even his calmness had purpose, to make you doubt your right to resist. He never needed to shout because the structure did the work. The praise, the pauses, the concern, they built invisible walls you learn to decorate instead of question. Seeing it doesn't erase what happened, but it names the system. It shows that your reactions were trained, not chosen. And that understanding is what begins to loosen the frame. At first it seems like relief. The silence after leaving feels wide and weightless. You expect freedom to rush in, but it doesn't. It's too quiet to trust. You check your phone out of habit, half waiting for his message, half dreading it. The absence of his rhythm feels disorienting, like missing a step on stairs you've climbed for years. You think, shouldn't I feel stronger than this? But that's the trap. Believing strength means certainty. Without him, the map in your head goes blank. You hesitate before small choices: what to wear, what to cook, who to call. Each pause reminds you how long your instincts were second-guessed. Freedom asks for decisions. Control had erased that muscle. Self-doubt arrives like background noise. You replay every argument, trying to locate the moment you let it happen. You study yourself as though there's a test you failed. But the emptiness you feel isn't weakness. It's the space where constant correction used to live. Friends say you seem distant. You nod, unsure how to explain that even rest feels suspicious now. He trained you to equate calm with danger's pause. Peace feels like waiting for something to go wrong. You start journaling just to hear your own tone again. The sentences come out uneven, like learning a language you once knew. That's what identity rebuilding sounds like, hesitant but alive. You're not missing him. You're missing the structure he built around you. It gave shape to your days, even as it took shape from you. That's the cost of the spell breaking, freedom mixed with vertigo. The emptiness isn't the end of love. It's the body adjusting to self-direction, the mind relearning where it begins. And though it feels hollow, it's the first honest quiet you've had in a long time. You've seen how silence once kept the peace. Now comes the harder part, learning sound again. At first, no feels foreign in your mouth. You test it on small things, declining an invitation, pausing before answering a request. The word sits heavy at first, then lighter. It doesn't slam doors, it steadies them. Each refusal is a small correction to an old script that trained you to please first, think later. Rebuilding boundaries isn't about distance, it's about naming your edges without apology. You notice how your shoulders loosen when you speak plainly. A friend asks for a favor, and you say, "I can't today," without layering it with reasons. The sentence feels incomplete but clean. That's what trust in yourself starts to sound like. Fewer explanations, more truth. Sometimes your body reacts before your thoughts catch up. A quick pulse, a held breath, a flash of guilt. You let it pass. That reaction is memory, not intuition. It fades slower than you expect but faster than you fear. He still crosses your mind, not as longing but as a reference point. You measure how differently you respond now. No more rehearsing what to say, no more searching for permission. The space that used to belong to him starts filling with quiet choices that are yours alone. You realize boundaries aren't walls, they're sentences spoken out loud, backed by calm repetition. They teach others how to meet you and remind you that self-respect is maintenance, not defense. You start catching yourself using new words: need, prefer, enough. They sound simple, but they build a language that doesn't hinge on approval. Each one rebuilds a rhythm where your own voice leads again. That's how recovery begins, not with a declaration, but with a steady return to honest speech, the kind that holds its ground without needing to explain why. You've felt how care can blur into control. This is where the truth separates them. Everything that seemed protective, the reminders, the favors, the gentle corrections, was never about your safety. It was about keeping you within reach. His kindness had rules. His comfort had terms. Each act of care came with an invisible clause. Stay small, stay grateful, stay his. For a long time, you mistook that containment for devotion. You told yourself the weight you carried was proof of importance. But real care doesn't bind, it steadies. It doesn't hover or decide, it listens and lets you move. You start to see how he borrowed the language of love to build control. The tone was right, but the meaning was hollow. Concern became strategy, affection became leverage. It wasn't safety, it was supervision dressed as tenderness. The difference is simple but radical. True care doesn't require surrender. It doesn't measure your worth by obedience. It makes space for your own pulse, your own pace. That's what frees you now. The recognition that nothing genuine demands permission to exist. What he called love was only possession. What remains is the quiet proof that care, when real, leaves both people standing whole. You already know how easily care can be rewritten into control. The only way out is together. It starts by naming what happened, without softening it, without apology. Saying the words breaks the private logic that kept it hidden. You don't owe anyone proof of what you felt. Truth is its own record. In the spaces where others listen without judgment, recovery grows faster. You learn to spot the same patterns in stories not your own, the favors that shrink freedom, the kindness that demands repayment. Each time someone names it, the architecture weakens a little more. Real connection doesn't monitor or manage. It lets you give freely, and it lets you stop. That's the measure of healthy care: generosity without debt, presence without control. You've already stepped outside the playbook by seeing it for what it was. The rest comes through practice, clear boundaries, shared language, mutual repair. You did the hard part by noticing. Keep going. Others are watching how you begin again. You've seen the playbook, now flip it, click the next episode. How to spot a manipulator before they spot you, and learn to see the game before it begins. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who might need these words today. Thanks for watching.